Alrighty, we are live, so let's get rolling here. Hey, this is Chuck Gross, and happy Wednesday. We're going to do something a little bit different today, and we'll return to our normally scheduled Q&A session next time. So as you may or may not know, I spent last weekend, Thursday through Sunday, in Kansas City, Missouri, attending the annual fitness summit. It's my second time there. So there was lots of drinking, lots of barbecue, and not much sleep. But that wasn't the whole purpose. It was a very intense learning experience across 2 whole days. And I wanted to kind of share with you my summary of what my takeaways were from the presenters. Some of them had more specific takeaways that were a little bit more suitable to what I'm all about, and so some were more general. But there were 11 presenters, so I don't really want to bombard you with too much information. So what I'll do is I'll include a linked timestamp in the description after this post to YouTube that you can just click through the presenter name and the name of their presentation to hear my summary of it. And then if there's anything that you want me to follow up on or go into more detail for, I'd love to talk to you about it. So this way, if you're not watching it live and you don't want to listen to all 11 summaries, you can just go through and click on the ones that sound interesting to you. Like I said, I'll have their name and the name of their presentation. You can skip to the one that matters to you. And again, if you want to talk about a specific topic that I bring up, please let me know. All right, so up first is Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. He was the first presentation. He's a medical doctor who's working on becoming an obesity specialist, and his talk was titled "Obesity Treatment: Moving Beyond, Eat Less, Move More." And I'm a big fan of his work. I know him. I've met him a couple times. He sent me a copy of his book, basically a framework for losing weight and keeping it off. And much of it is very similar to what we do if you're working with me. So I highly recommend that book. Much of it will seem already familiar to you, but there are some other things that he, being an obesity specialist, can kind of clarify that I simply cannot, such as prescription drugs to kind of help with overeating, as far as eating beyond hunger and that type of thing. So basically what Spencer covered was that obesity is a disease, and that there's a saying that obese people just need to eat less, move more, but that's not actually treating the disease. It's the equivalent of telling a depressed person to feel better or cheer up, or an alcoholic just to drink less to solve their problem. So while there is a physical aspect to the whole process of using exercise as medicine, it's combined with a diet, to create weight loss. But there are other things going on that also need to be addressed and accounted for. So, for example, during and after weight loss, there are studies recent that are showing that NEAT, which is any activity you get that's not scheduled exercise, that when you lose weight, that actually goes down as a result. I've seen that in my own case. So that can account for a large amount of calories as part of your metabolism. So when that drops, your metabolism seems like it basically sinks. My understanding from what was said is that people that have thyroid issues, their NEAT goes away essentially, and that basically that could be the difference between needing to eat 1,000 calories a day to lose weight to eating 2,500 calories a day and losing weight. That your non-exercise activity in a day, which is like fidgeting, moving around, wiggling, the desire to get up and move around, being restless, that is a huge amount of calories in a day because it adds up over time. I know, like I said, in my case, having lost 200 pounds, if I don't force myself to get up, I could literally sit in one spot all day long without moving and be wrapped up in what I'm doing and not notice that I haven't moved all day. There are days where I simply don't move at all. I get maybe 2,000 steps because I'm so busy that if I didn't have my Fitbit that I could see, oh my gosh, this is 2,000 steps, this is awful, that's barely going to the bathroom enough, that I have to force myself to get up and move because I don't have any metabolic or physical drive to just get up and move around, whereas other people do. So that's something to keep in mind. That can't be understated. The idea of moving around all day long, not just at scheduled periods for exercise. So, like I said, I look at this in my own case where I view obesity as something that's not just cured or that I overcame, but it's a condition that I live with that I have to manage, and that's one of the things that I have to do as part of that. Lastly, Dr. Spencer talked about medicines that he does prescribe in his clinic, that can help to manage hunger. And then there are a couple ones where your reward centers are broken, meaning you're totally fine. But when you see chocolate cake, you just feel this need to stuff yourself because you feel like you need to be rewarded. There are some prescription medicines that in an obesity clinic they can prescribe. So again, if that's something you want to know more about, please let me know and we'll talk about it. All right, so the next presentation was Kelly Coffey, and her topic was the myth of thin, what no one told me about losing 150 pounds. So if you can't tell from the name of the topic, Kelly is someone like me that struggled to lose weight her entire life, but eventually she was able to lose 150 pounds and keep it off. And now Kelly helps other people with those struggles just like I do. Her talk specifically was about what is the root cause of the self-destructive habits of obesity. So for men, Kelly said that this manifests as guilt over things, feeling guilty about what you ate, feeling guilty about not working out. But in women, it manifests a little bit differently, and that's shame. It's a feeling that there's something fundamentally wrong with us, that we're screwed no matter what, and that if we don't address this root cause buried deep within us, which is a shame, that we tend to kind of transfer that to other things, which is why you see many people that lose weight become alcoholics, which is like addiction transference, and then they kind of as a result makes them overweight again. So if you don't attack that root, you can do everything right, you can eat right, you can exercise, but if you're not attacking the deep down root of the problem, you're just kind of waiting for it to come back. So it was a very powerful talk about that. So part of that is that there's this mentality towards weight loss and fitness. It's based on the false premise that we are broken and that we have to focus by fixing things. It's kind of almost a dichotomy of there's a shame you have to fix, but the point is that it's all the other things are not what's broken. It's just that there's an underlying root cause that has to be overcome. So we have the power of choice to feel good about ourselves, and we have to accept ourselves as we are, and then we are worthy of self-love. So Kelly challenged everyone there to find one thing that they love about their body that wasn't your eyes right now that you love. What part of your body do you love? So I've thought about that myself, but I would ask anyone watching, I challenge you, as Kelly did, what is one thing that you love about your body right now that's not your eyes? So think about that, and I don't expect you to answer right away. It's going to require some deep thought. I know in Kelly's case, she had asked a client that, and they said, that's BS. Why don't you answer that question? What did you love when you were 350 pounds? And it took her a week or two to come up with it, but I think that's a good question. All right, next up is Tony Gentilcore, and his talk was centered on the deadlift. It was aptly titled The Deadlift. The basics of that talk was that there is no best variation of the deadlift unless you're a power lifter, at which point you want to compete with it, whichever one you're strongest at. But Tony went through all the possible variations, and it's basically depending on your mobility. There's basically a scale. If you're not very mobile, your trap bar deadlift's your best bet. If you are very mobile, conventional is probably your best bet, with sumo deadlift kind of falling right in the middle. Other than that, there are a bunch of different variations like single leg deadlifts, etc., with dumbbells, what have you, rack pulls that you can do as intermediary steps to getting to one of those three. Beyond that, Tony really just recommended the dead bug as a great core exercise to kind of lead you towards deadlifts. This sounds like something you'd want to work on. I'd recommend you Google Tony Gentilcore dead bugs, and he has an article written about the right way to do them. It's kind of like what it sounds, where you're laying on your back and you have your knees up in the air and you're kind of wiggling around. I don't know if you'd want to do that when there's a bunch of other people around, but what the hell, why not? Alrighty, moving right along. The next presenter was Dr. Heather Leidy, who is an assistant professor of nutrition and exercise physiology at the University of Missouri. And her topic was protein intake for health and performance. Dr. Leidy went through all the body of research that is available and current, as well as her own research in that field, and and as well as what her colleagues are conducting. The basics of that research summation is that for the purposes of hunger management, ensuring that you get at least 20 to 30 grams of protein in every single meal is the best thing you could possibly do. Now, that kind of sounds intuitive if you've been doing it for any length of time. You know that if you eat protein, it helps you feel full. However, the point is that they actually have research that measures the satiety of meals based on their contents, and they even compared solid chewable protein, like a chicken breast, whatever have you, versus a protein shake, and the solid protein will keep you more full longer. And again, that's not really surprising. It's just that there is now actual documented scientific research that we can point to and say, look, it's not just intuition, it's fact, or there's enough evidence that you should strongly consider it at least. So there are some other things in there about they've pinpointed which amino acid that comprises protein helps with building muscle, and that's leucine. But Dr. Leidy kind of recommended that the most important thing you can do would be to set up your breakfast meal having 30 or more grams of protein, and that will kind of set your day up for success, regardless if your goal is muscle gain, fat loss, or athletic performance. She closed with some examples of ways to get a good protein-filled breakfast, and she used it was a local company called Start Right Waffles, which is like a high-protein waffle and pancake mix. Some other examples were like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese with fruit, or something like high-fiber oatmeal mixed with protein powder. These are all things you've probably heard me mention. I don't eat breakfast myself. However, high fiber oatmeal with protein powder is probably the cheapest, quickest breakfast you could possibly make. Many people make it overnight, and you can look for recipes. It's called Proats, Proats. There's tons of people that do that for breakfast, and it's a great way to start your day. Alrighty, this next one is from Dr. Mike T. Nelson, and it was titled "The Challenges of Online Fitness Coaching." So this was more of like a business-oriented talk that kind of appealed to entrepreneurs about if you're not currently in online training, how you get there from being a gym trainer to online. And it really went through stuff like newsletters, marketing, some of the tools that Mike uses with his clients. One thing that Mike does differently than most people is that he has his clients measure their heart rate every morning when they first wake up. Mike is actually a researcher on heart rate variability, if that's something that interests you. Essentially what it boils down to is if you take your heart rate in the mornings when you wake up, if you notice that your heart rate is getting higher progressively, then you need to take a break from whatever you're doing that's strenuous, meaning, okay, you shouldn't work out that day. You should probably go easy on the diet. Don't go too low in carbs, things like that. But there's like a whole movement around that where it's based on your biofeedback. What is your body telling you? And you can measure that stuff now with like a Fitbit to say, hey, look, my heart rate's up this morning for no good reason that I can see. So I should probably rest today and then recheck the next day. Yes, that makes it harder to schedule exercise, but a lot of this research is kind of being tailored to athletes. That's not to say there's not applications for the rest of us, though. One of the biggest takeaway other than that was that Mike really stressed that when it comes to an online client-coach relationship, more frequent communication is always better for both parties. And that always leads to better results. And that's something I've always kind of felt intuitively. So if that's something that interests you and you'd like to try, please do. I do try to recommend that, but maybe hearing it this way, if you want to communicate more frequently, just let me know. Alrighty, moving right along. The next presenter was Nick Tuminello. It was a practical demonstration of single leg training. Nick is considered the trainer of trainers, and he was recently voted Personal Trainer of the Year. He's basically my go-to for example videos of exercises. He's under YouTube under the name Performance U, the letter U. He has basically every possible exercise you could think of in any variation. He has a video showing the proper form. I didn't really take many notes because he actually had us standing up and doing these exercises. I couldn't have a notepad. I was very thankful for this because it's ironic, but the fitness conference was a lot of sitting in a chair. So I was thankful to get up and move around and go through some single leg exercises and lose my balance and fall over and be embarrassed. But like I said, that's Nick Tuminello on Performance U on YouTube, and that's his website too. Okay, so this is one more, and that wraps up the first day. And like I said, the conference was like from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. of just nonstop learning and interacting and that type of stuff. So the last one of the day was Bret Contreras. You may have heard of Bret. He's known as the glute guy. That's the butt muscles. That's kind of his online presence, and he has a PhD as well. And they're all related to the glutes, the butt muscles. So he does one thing and he does it well. So his talk was titled "Practical Lower Body Training Tips." The biggest takeaway here was that there's, due to so many differences in bone and muscle structure, that the form is going to vary person to person, and it basically just went through different ways that working with people that are all shapes and sizes is the best way to get them to be moving correctly, to move the most weight, and how that impacts their lower body training. That basically covers it. Like I said, it was a lot of like taking someone from the crowd and assessing their lower body lift forms, usually squats or glute raises, and basically just saying like, look, this is how their body is, this is the length of their legs. Therefore, here's some things you can do to make their stance feel a little bit more natural. And that kind of wraps up day one. So moving on to day two, there's only a couple more left. Greg Nuckols was the next one, and Greg is a record-holding powerlifter. He's a coach, and he's an amazing writer over at his blog called String Theory. It's kind of like a combination of string theory and physics and strength, because basically all of his articles are really well written. Almost like they're textbooks, but they're not boring, about the lifts and the physiology behind them. Like he has an article on the squat that's like could be a book on squats that he just has it there for you to read if you're into that type of heavy reading. But he's a really nice guy, and he's super easy to talk to pretty much about everything. My favorite thing about Greg is that when he talks about a subject, that's how he talks about all of them. So he doesn't he seems excited about everything when you talk to him. So he's pretty even keel about different topics. So his talk was basically why every single person on earth should be lifting weights. And he talked about all the current research that showed the benefits beyond what you may hear from a regular personal trainer. Things like longevity, bone health, disease prevention, above all, and how it makes you feel great. And also how there are now tons of studies, many of them recent, that show how safe it is. You're more likely to be injured getting food out of a vending machine, basically. Yes, there are lots of people that you see with injuries on the internet, but there are also lots of people weightlifting don't have any injuries. So this particular talk made me smile because he's going to provide the slides after the fact to share with people that might be hesitant. I know the one person I'm going to give them a copy to is my mom. My mom kind of approached me and was interested in strength training, but I kind of noticed some hesitation because she'd read about how good it was. But this would be great to kind of hand to her and say, look, this is someone that can read research, is well-spoken, and lays it out very clearly to an audience of people that probably have no experience with strength training or exposure either. So I'm going to give that to my mom. If I get the slides and you want a copy, just let me know, please, and I'll get them to you as soon as I can. Alrighty, so next up was Dean Somerset. Dean is an internationally known personal trainer who's considered an expert on injury and medical dysfunction management. And what that means is he just kind of helps people move or get to a point where they can move correctly to exercise. And that's called like assessments. Being Canadian, he has worked with NHL players. His talks are always eye-opening. He always has like one thing that you can't forget. It's like amazing. He's kind of like a wizard. The basics of his talk was that if you're trying to figure out if someone's ready to perform any exercise in the gym, there are two specific assessments you can do. And basically the first one is, can you put your hands above your head and touch your biceps to the side of your head? If you can do that, that means that you're pretty much ready to do any overhead movements or anything where you're lifting from your shoulders up. That pretty much clears you for that. If you can't, probably means you need to work on your shoulder mobility. Second one was, I'm not going to stand up and demonstrate this one, was can you touch your toes or touch your palms to the ground? If not, you need to work on your mobility, your lower body mobility, before you go into a rigid exercise program that has you basically bending over, because it's likely that you would pull your back or something if you can't even get to your toes. So there was a practical takeaway that applied to me directly, was that he looked at hip mobility, meaning like picking laying on the ground, picking your leg up and rotating your hip. I had my right hip was nearly immobile. And that kind of correlates with what I've seen in the gym, where Sometimes I'll get some tightness around my hip, and it makes my form feel really bad. And sometimes I get some pulling on my lower back, and I haven't really known what to do about it specifically. And what he recommended was that I do some side planks where I'm working on my stability and engaging my core. It's not that my core was weak, it's just I needed to engage my core on the weak side only to make, basically to release and have the stability. So basically I on the side that was bad, I did a side plank, contracted my core and breathed out heavily. And after that, we retested my hip mobility on that side, and there was an immediate shocking improvement. So I was like, I'm never going to forget that after that was shown. And that's kind of an example of the work that Dean does. All right, a couple more here. The next presentation was a husband and wife team with the name of Roland and Galina Denzel, and it was called Fat Loss for the Unskilled Client. Roland, like me, was fat for his whole life pretty much, but by now he'd lost and maintained like 110-pound weight loss. This was one of my favorite presentations because much of what they do with their clients are similar things that I like to do, similar philosophies, similar approaches, looking at the habits of fat loss, and not just eat less, move more, but the actual getting into the nitty gritty of like, okay, you need to manage your sleep, you have to work on your stress, group support and social support is huge, things like that. And they kind of presented it in a way where they had some really out of the box thinking that really got me thinking about like, what else am I not thinking of? And that was really helpful to kind of see someone else with a similar approach, but then see the things that they included that I hadn't thought of, and then also to see the things that I thought of and they didn't think of. So it was really great to be able to like see that, and then I was able to talk to Roland afterwards and kind of bounce ideas off of him. So I think I'm going to be talking to Roland again and kind of seeing if we can share some additional ideas about some different ways to help people. The one idea that I kind of hinted at, but I really, really like is they really hammered on this, was that we need to keep moving all day long, and there are good reasons to do that. One of those reasons was that if you're moving all day long, you have better blood sugar control, which makes you not as hungry all the time and helps you manage your cravings. So just moving all day, getting up every 30 minutes and moving around, no matter what, no exceptions, is a huge benefit to your health and fat loss efforts. They talked about there's a new activity level called sedentary couch potato. And up until recently, that kind of described me, where I'd be sitting all day and then I'd work out and then I'd go back to sitting. So that was that was eye-opening for me a little bit. And the other thing was that they, back to the whole protein thing, they also recommended, starting your day with 30 grams of protein, but really also trying to include vegetables. And that was both for the physical reason of having a good meal in, and also the psychological reason of, setting your day up for success. So that covers that one. The next one, I missed some of this presentation because I went out for barbecue with a couple people, and we ate barbecue out of the back of a truck in the Midwest. And it was very American. It was about the myths of the glycemic index, and this was by Dr. Susan Kleiner. She's a scientist and researcher, and she's basically an authority on nutrition. The people that are like the researchers on nutrition now kind of looked up to her as a mentor when they were going through school and starting to work in the field. She basically said that the glycemic index doesn't really apply. It's rarely used, and that, for health, weight loss, and sports performance, we're better off concentrating on mixed meals and making minor changes that are simple without going overboard and worrying about these complex things that don't really matter when you look at them in the context of an entire meal. So again, it was just basically like, we're making this too complicated. Just eat your protein and vegetables, and make minor improvements where you can, and don't stress about the minor details that you can't really control too much. All right, next up was my coach, Bryan Krahn, and he talked about how he trains people for aesthetics, which is basically bodybuilding without going on stage and competing. And that's how that's different than strength training. Bryan made a great analogy that strength training is like math. You plug in the numbers, and there's a very strict progression and results that you expect to get, and there's this framework for what to do when you don't get those. But the training for aesthetics is more like jazz or philosophy. There's an art to it. And that's a much more difficult thing to do, because you really have to deal more with how people feel. The the primary takeaway is that the thing coaches and trainers need to do first is focus on getting people lean, as building muscle is that much easier when you're lean, and you're less likely to regain fat when you're lean. It just makes you feel a whole lot better to be leaner. And he also talked about his principle of least mode instead of beast mode. Meaning you have to really account for all of someone's stressors and their recovery, and you can't just go all out all the time. And that's usually encountered with young males, where they just want to go all out and they don't really think about longevity and, weightlifting the rest of their life. I'm 35. I plan on weightlifting till I'm 90 or older, if I live that long. I hope I do. But I'm going to live that long well. I'm going to be weightlifting the entire time, and I'm going to do it in a way that it's sustainable so that I can do it the whole time. So closing everything up was the presentation from Alan Aragon. If you haven't heard of Alan, he is a research reviewer. He's a celebrity coach. He's a forum moderator, or was, on bodybuilding.com. He's an international speaker, and he's basically the authority right now when it comes to nutrition. One of his coaching clients is Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Stone Cold Steve Austin actually approached him. He didn't get referred. It was literally Stone Cold Steve Austin needed some nutrition coaching and sought out who the best was. So I'll give you an idea. He's kind of a mentor to me, in that when I was learning about nutrition, I was really getting into the details and I was kind of getting lost. And he was able to really speak plainly about, look, you need to take a balanced approach, because here's what the research says. And the things you're focusing on, there's no scientific consensus on. And also, not only looking at the science, but, look, hey, here's a whole bunch of people that have practical experience with clients, that you kind of have to meet those two in the middle. And that's what evidence-based coaching is. And that's kind of what I aspire to. So his talk was about that, and how you succeed in the fitness industry without giving up your integrity, which was incredibly important. And it really resonated with me. Basically, he said that you want to be working toward what you want to do, what your vision of your life is, that it has to be something that you enjoy so much that you don't want anyone to take it away from you for any amount of money. And then if you're not there yet, you need to be aiming for that as much as possible. And he also coined the term, which made me laugh, big, hairy, audacious goal. And so that we should all have this goal that's kind of way out in left field, that doesn't seem like you'd be able to reach it, but you should just strive to get there. So, all right, well, that's a lot of talking. I pretty much talked for half an hour. But like I said, I will have the time codes on the video description if you're not watching live. And if there's any topic I mentioned that interests you, or if you wanted to talk about Dr. Spencer's book, let me know, and I'd be happy to kind of dive into the details. I wanted to thank Danny. Danny recommended that I use the Hangout to summarize what I learned at the summit. But we will return to our regularly scheduled Q&As next week. So if you had questions, I will get to them then. If you have something that needs answered before then, let me know. One more thing, what I'll be doing for next week is I'm going to schedule a cutoff point for the Hangouts, so that if there aren't any questions asked, we'll just reschedule for the next time. All right, so thank you everyone for listening or watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.